Well, hello there.
Hey, Mike, what's up, man?
Not too much. How are you, Robbie?
Man, I'm just I'm riding out this epic ice storm here in KC.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is that moving the game? Wait, did they move the game?
They moved the game on Friday. They canceled schools here last Thursday night for Friday, and we literally have nothing.
Oh, no.
I mean, how typical is that?
It's pretty typical, I think.
It's so typical of A, the news, and B, especially the weather. I mean, we touched on this, or I should send you a text message. I'm like, everybody likes to bash the weathermen pretty much every single day of the year because they're wrong all the time. Then when it comes something to panic about, everybody just jumps on board and goes ballistic. And that's what's happened here. I mean, we're getting some spitting like rain right now, but with the definition of storm has been just adversely changed forever in my mind.
Oh, well, maybe it'll come later, though. Or is it done? Or we don't know.
It's going to be 50 here tomorrow, so...
Okay.
Yeah, they failed.
Well, before we get going, I'd like to give a special shout-out to our listeners in China. They're really picking it up. Actually, no, I was going to ask you a quick question just for fun. I was just looking at the search...
Do I have to answer in Chinese?
No.
Okay. All right.
United States is our number one listening country, but I was just going to ask if you had an idea maybe of who number 2 was.
The UK.
Ooh, yeah, well, close.
Is it?
They're number 3.
Okay, close enough. Yeah, that's the best I got.
It's another triathlon hotbed, as I have stated.
Oh, Australia?
Well.
Oh, let me guess. Your newfound country of Canada.
Yes, Canada.
Man, good. Thank you. Up north, taking a listen.
Yeah, they're bringing it strong. We are all over the world. So I've got a lot of things going on, and I am getting back in. I'm training, as we know, for Chattanooga 70.3. I'm pretty stoked about it. I wasn't about 2 weeks ago until you put me on the 3-2-1 plan to get my juices flowing again, and it has done wonders.
Yes, 3-2-1 plan. Simple, effective, and is pretty much perfect for anyone in the off season who's taking any kind of a break. Yeah, the 3-2-1 plan is a game changer.
Yeah, it has been for me. In fact, yesterday, just so you know, as a coach, you're my coach. I had my longest run probably since Ironman Wisconsin.
Since Wisconsin, yeah, 10 miles.
Yep. So, and I feel pretty good, and it went solid, up, down, and today I feel good, and today I get into the pool. I'm a little out of order, but I hope you don't mind.
That's all right. You don't have to be in too much order.
That's kind of the essence of 3-2-1, actually. It is. Everything about it is meant to help get your mind straight, and that's what it's doing. So, I didn't think it was possible, dude, but we did a podcast a little bit ago called How Not to Suck at Swimming, and I thought it covered everything, but I guess you're telling me it didn't.
No, it didn't. You know, I there's so much, and I tell people this all the time when I work with them. There is so much in swimming. It's almost like learning a different language. And you know, you can, and I think that's what a lot of coaches do, and even a lot of companies do when they try to help other people, improve their swim. It's complete overload. And you just get lost in the material and the information, and you have little left to apply it once you actually kind of get down to the basics of it. And I didn't want to overwhelm too many people on the first one. And while that's pretty much the basics that you can take, and we've obviously had a really, really great response. Lots of emails. Of people who are getting some personal best times in the pool, how it's helped them simplify things, and I want to kind of go into a little bit more depth, just for our listeners who maybe aren't beginner level swimmers, and then also the ones who have already listened to it. And I would encourage you, if you're a new subscriber or listener and if you haven't listened to the first one, listen to that one first and then do this one because it'll make a lot more sense.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Yeah, we have been getting a lot of feedback on that one, and it is our highest listened to podcast to date, the swimming. and it keeps climbing, and I think a lot of people are interested in this, and I am too, and it's sort of like, I've been swimming now for 4 years or whatever under your tutelage, and still it's always good to go back and look at this stuff and hear it from your side and remind me to stay in the pocket. So we're going to go through about 7 topics here maybe, and the first one, and this is a great one because it's obviously the key to swimming, but
it's actually the key to life, Mike.
It's the key to life, and I can't tell you how many people I have run into, like at the lake when I'm out there swimming, my buoy and back routine, and I'll come back and I'll be resting, and people come up, man, I always wanted to start swimming, but I just can't figure out how to breathe. I can't get the breathing part right. So why don't we start on the breathing, how and when, and go into it.
Yeah, this is a great topic, and one that I don't necessarily think a lot of people touch on, and this kind of spurred on my semi-rant last week when there's an athlete that I work with now who had a previous coach that suggested breathing every 3 to 5. And I think a lot of companies that do like online YouTube or even clinics suggest breathing every 3 or 5 because it makes you look like you're going smoother. And the biggest thing with triathletes is that most of them come from like a very raw background. They don't have a lot of experience, and breathing. And I'll just tell you verbatim what I told this athlete is: swimming is not a breath holding competition.
Yeah.
It is a swimming competition, and where you're trying to get to destination A to destination B as fast as possible. And for most triathletes, and for probably most people out there listening, you're probably not a very efficient breather as is, because it takes you a while to develop a good rhythm, and then just keeping like the mental mindfulness of how I need to exhale underwater. So for example, for those of you out there who have been in the rut of breathing every 3 or every 5 or God forbid every 7 strokes, it is not possible for you to exhale the whole entire time while you're doing a 3 to 5 to 7 stroke and then get back that same amount of oxygen when you breathe. Because when you breathe, you're breathing very quickly. And if you're not breathing quickly, then you're swimming so slow that this conversation really isn't going to matter at this point.
Okay.
And breathing every stroke does a couple things. One, it gives you one stroke to worry about. One stroke.
Mm-hmm.
An argument you get a lot of people is, oh, well, you'll become dominant on one side. You only need to become dominant, period. Okay, so especially when you're coming into the sport triathlon or swimming in general, you need to learn how to perfect just swimming. And swimming is a very rhythmic. You need to get in a groove. You need to find, where you can get smooth and you feel good. And if you breathe, just breathing every 3 strokes, you really have, or every 3, breathing once every 3 strokes, you're having to learn 3 different strokes. Breathing from your right, taking a stroke, not breathing at all, breathing from your left. Now you're having to learn how to catch and pull on both sides a certain way. Then you're having to learn how to not breathe. And it can really, really complicate your swimming. And if you watch people from the 100 freestyle to the 1500 freestyle swimming or open water swimmers in the Olympics, everybody breathes every stroke. They will occasionally breathe every 3 if they want to just kind of change it up. But it gives you the best breathing pattern. You exhale, you inhale. You exhale, you inhale. There is no holding your breath underwater and then, you get like a hyperventilative effect. And for a lot of people, it also allows them to. I get this a lot where athletes say that their fatigue and their arms start to go towards the end of a set when they're breathing every 3 to 5. And what happens is the more fatigued your arms get, your whole body's fatigued. So when you start to exhale on that 3 to 5, you're so exhausted that you have to, we talk about this all the time, you have to glide. And you kind of have to leave your arm out. And the reason you do that is because you have to purposely keep your head out of the water longer so you can try to take in more breath.
Yeah.
So you start to glide, so you leave that left left hand or right hand extended as far as possible while you have your face out of the water to get that extra breath.
And as you say that, it occurred to me that if you're breathing every 3 or 5 or whatever, it might, unless you're really well oiled at doing that, it would seem to me like you're saying about the exhale, that it would be very difficult almost to find a timing for that, because that is the one thing I remember when I first got into the pool and started swimming was when you're breathing, you can't breathe unless you're exhaled well. So, that rhythm of every breath, every stroke, to me makes a lot more sense, because you're just putting your head underwater and you're breathing out, and then you're kind of coming back up and you're breathing in. And one of the things where I really noticed it when I would do turns, and I still don't do flip turns, so we can let that go. But when I push off the wall, I used to hold my breath, and it was screwing everything up. So the minute you start holding your breath, I think, is when you get into trouble, because your breathing pattern and rhythm gets off of kilter. So is that kind of on the same lines of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely in the same area. It's just I don't understand. I think it's easier for people when they're trying to fix like a gliding stroke to kind of pause and do it that way. But the reason there's even a study out there about swimming and breathing every what they call it, 2 strokes is considered a cycle, because you're not breathing every stroke, you're doing a left and a right and then you're breathing. But there are studies out there that say that you're going to get at least 27% more oxygen if you breathe every cycle than if you want to breathe every 3, 5 or even go farther than that. For example, if you wanted to replicate it, is exhale for a count of 5 and then inhale for only a half second to see if you can, and do that repeatedly and see if you feel like you get as much back in as you're putting out.
Yeah.
And you're not. And so if you find yourself thinking, all right, well, I don't have to exhale the whole time my head's in the water, well, then ask yourself another question. Why am I holding my breath when this is an aerobic and anaerobic competition where I need as much oxygen as possible?
Okay, and I'm going to ask you this question about that, in a serious question. Not that we want to, get in bad habits or anything, but is that something that might increase your capacity for oxygen if you practiced it while in training versus the race?
Oh, it's something that has to be done during practice, because there is you do need to get used to it, because you're going to get kind of a different rhythm. But a lot of people, the reason that they panic as well is because for some people, breathing every cycle or every stroke gives them that kind of hyperventilated feeling. They're breathing in, they're breathing out very, very quickly. So when they hop in the water and do an open water swim for a race, you're not taking 5 strokes and then breathing. You're panicked, and you're starting to breathe every single stroke out of the gate.
But I meant like practicing holding your breath for 2 strokes occasionally while you're training. Does that help your capacity, you think? There will be sets where I will prescribe that for athletes, and I have a workout just because on the top of my head that I just prescribed. It's called Anaerobic Overload, and it's a really, really long swim. It's like an hour and a half swim, broken up obviously, and that includes rest. And it's has long like 500s where it was breathing every 5 to 7. Okay.
And so they might do these once a month, but these aren't those aren't for those are more of what they call hypoxic sets.
Okay.
Which are to, like you were kind of touching on, is to really get your body to start to use oxygen a little more wisely, but also I think makes you a little more comfortable and mindful of when you breathe and how you breathe, because it's going to be at a premium.
Got it. Like it. All right, here's another great one that is that runs through the fabric of swimming, and everybody talks about it, but I don't know if a lot of people understand it. And that is the body positioning. And today you're going to go through that for us.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on how and why the catch is so important to body positioning. And this will kind of be a perfect segue into our next one, which is hand entry and exit. But the body positioning, there's always been this huge argument that you should do it with your legs. And obviously, if you listen to the first part of this podcast, part 1 of how to not suck at swimming, you realize that kicking has little to do with your body positioning. It's your core, it's putting your chest down, it's having your chin down as well, and that pushes your butt up. Your legs are attached to your butt, ergo legs are on the surface. The other part that people really, really don't ever take into consideration when thinking about how much easier it is to get your body position higher in the water is the catch. So, it's pretty common physics that, what goes up must go down, but what goes down must come up.
Okay.
So if you're swimming on top of the water, like we all do, and you get an early catch, and for those of us listening, we talked about catch earlier, is you want that early vertical forearm, you'll often see it abbreviated as EVF, is to get where your forearm is pressing water backwards. So in order to get when your hand enters the water, your palm and your forearm inside of your triceps and biceps, once that enters the water fully elongated, okay, that's all facing the bottom of the pool, facing south. In order to get your forearm positioned to where it's pushing water back, you have to push down on the water.
Okay.
When you're pushing down on the water, it raises your body higher.
Yeah.
When you're pushing down, it raises your hips higher, ergo also helping you sustain a more straight body position in the water, helping out your legs. I'll tell anybody, go to the pool tomorrow or this week, keep your chin down, not to where the back of your head is facing, the wall, but keep your chin and your eyes down, keep your chest down, and try to get an early pull and feel how it propels your body forward. And we do a lot of this, Mike, when I have the guys and the ladies use bands. It is, you have to use your proprioception, which is your understanding of where your body, a certain body part is in space. And doing that in the water, using the band is where you're just isolating everything basically from the pelvis up. And, if you're swimming really, really well, you can control your body positioning, not just by the chest, but by how much you're pushing down and then pushing back. So, body positioning isn't always about the core and your legs and your chest. It's also about what you do with your arms. If you sink your elbow before you catch, or you have a really poor catch, you have no leverage to keep your body up. And that is what a lot of triathletes miss out on, is that they just don't have that leverage to press down on enough water that it in turn helps keep the body risen towards the top of the water.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think probably one of the main reasons people can't get in that groove is because of the fitness, right? I mean, that, again, going back to podcast 1, is that being strong in the water. Once you get to a point where you're really in the groove and fit to be able to do that sort of things, it becomes easier and less or subconscious, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely comes with increased arm fitness, but also just a general understanding of, I'll segue into our next one, which is hand entry and exit. How and when. And this is another huge discrepancy in coaching. And it's honestly, I'll be honest with you, man, it's really unfortunate that there are so many people out there getting so much bad advice. The hand entry and the exit is very, very simple. And so is the how and the when.
Okay.
Forget everything you know about what your arm looks like out of the water. I don't care if it looks like a straight arm. I don't care if it looks like you're having a high elbow. I don't care if it looks like a waving noodle out of the water. As long as when you take your stroke, you enter, your hand enters the water as far out as it possibly can, as far as your arm can reach. That's your first win.
Okay.
And now what I will do to explain the rest of what your hand and your forearm should do is I'll use what I use a lot is called the book analogy.
Okay.
When you place your hand on top of the water, I want you to imagine, and if you're listening to this, take a book, put it in the palm of your hand, or take a paddle to the pool and take the wrist straps off. If you can place your hand on top of the water, and place that paddle or book underneath it. It is now your job to do a perfect stroke as long as you possibly can to extend your arm backwards before it exits and still keep the book or paddle pressed against your hand.
All right.
Now, in order to do that, you're going to have to apply pressure, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so if you're applying pressure to that book, you're also applying pressure to what?
The forearm? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, the forearm or the water.
The water, yeah.
And if you're applying pressure to water, you're moving it. And that's something that's a hard thing for people to understand, is that you're not trying to swim through the water. You're trying to use the water as a means to get to where you're going. Okay? So you're actually pulling yourself through the water, not moving through it. So picture this. Your hand enters, it hits the book. Now, if you drop your elbow and it becomes lower than your both your shoulder and your palm, and then try to pull backwards, the book's going to drop to the bottom of the pool. Mm-hmm. If you, however, pop your elbow higher, then I would say your shoulder and obviously your wrist, you're going to continue to have pressure on that book, and now the pressure is pointed backwards. Now you're pressing the book backwards, which in turn is obviously pressing the water backwards. If I'm pressing the water backwards, guess what's moving forwards?
The body.
Me. Yeah, the body is. And one of the simplest things that a swimmer can do in the back end of their swim stroke is to keep their palm facing the back of the back as long as possible. This is something that I learned back in 2010 or 11. I worked with a guy who did swim analysis in an endless pool, and his dad was the head coach for Western Kentucky for a long, long time, put out a lot of Olympians, and he was actually in charge of, at one point at the University of Indiana, breaking down the swim stroke of Mark Spitz.
Yeah.
Now, when you say breaking down the stroke of Mark Spitz, you're thinking, all right, how are you going to find anything wrong with his stroke? Yeah. That's the thing. You have to be responsible for finding the smallest, most minute area and technique flaw to correct it, because in the Olympics, it's obviously about hundredths of a second. And one of the first things I learned from him was that so many athletes, once their hand comes towards their hips, they bring it out of the water because that gives them that high elbow. What you're doing is you're missing out on continuing to press with your palm as far back as possible. You're missing out on the last half of your stroke.
Is that, would you call that the push part?
Yeah, we call that the final push.
Okay.
And, we talk about it all the time, and that's when I consider the book, is you hold on to that book and you press it back to where your arm is literally extended, totally extended straight backwards, but your palm is still facing the wall and not down and not up. So you're still pressing water up until the very, very last second before it's time for your hand and arm to actually exit the water. You enter palm facing down, you exit palm facing back. And it's really as simple as that. But those are just, so many athletes and swimmers and triathletes, they cut their stroke in half because they're taught to get a high elbow. And in order to get a high elbow, you have to exit by your hip.
Yeah.
You have to reach, you have to pull, and you have to exit with your hand, doing no work and no push, but you get your high elbow. And then you start again. And you're just cheating yourself. If you got your hand in the water, if you got your hand in the cookie jar, why not get as many cookies as possible?
Got it, yeah.
If you got your hand in the water and your forearm in the water, why not push as much water backwards for as long as you can to get yourself to move forward?
On that, since we're on the hand part of it, I just want to ask a question, because a lot of people have asked me, and I've wondered myself a lot of times, when you bring the hand in, talk about for a second the fingers. Are they tight together? Are they loosely spread, or what's the most effective way?
You're gonna have different variations across the board.
Okay.
They shouldn't be wide open like a web. Mm-hmm. I would just say comfortable.
Okay.
You shouldn't squeeze them together and try to hold pennies when you're doing strokes, but it should be comfortable, and it should be to where your purpose is to grip the water, not breeze through with the least amount of resistance.
Got it.
Having said that, some people tend to get a better feel for the water because your hand isn't what makes you fast. It's your forearm, because it's a much bigger paddle than your hand. And so a lot of people, they have what they call, just that feel for the water is to get their hand in a place to where they can get their forearm back as quickly as possible.
Yeah. A lot of times when I don't know if this is right or not, but a lot of times when I'm just starting to swim or just warming up or in the beginning of a race, or sometimes I'll keep my fingers a little bit wider, and for whatever reason that keeps them more relaxed, and it feels easier for me to just kind of warm up. So, and then as the race goes on, I kind of get more dialed into the power that is created. So it's sort of just like getting the arms loose and then accelerating the power as you're warmed up.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the very, very few drills, I guess that you would call, that I actually recommend in order for you to get a feel of how important it is how important your hand is, how important your forearm is, and how important a fast turnover is what I call the fist drill. Mm-hmm. And that is literally just swimming with your fists closed. Mm-hmm. It helps you do a lot of things, and actually is what I use a lot. We'll be moving to this next topic, but it's what I use a lot to get people to swim just with a faster turnover, and it gives you a really good feel for the body. It gives you a really good feel for how much I need you, because you can only use your forearms.
Yeah, exactly.
You can and also it gives you a sense of how much work your forearms do. It also gives you a sense of how much work your hands do, because it feels totally awkward and weird. But it also gives you a really, really good idea of having to move your arms fast, because if you don't, then you're dead in the water.
Yeah, I've done that a lot. It's a pretty good one. Okay, so then we're going on from there, and you said that's one of the good ways to deprogram from bad advice and techniques that you may have assimilated in the past.
Yeah, and this is a huge one. This is going to be part of my personal mission in 2017, is to deprogram as many swimmers as possible. And coming to a triathlon club near you across the country, 2017. And that is one of the biggest areas of difficulty when working with a swimmer, is somebody who has a lot of people get given bad advice, but a lot of people just don't know what to do. And then a lot of people have been taught they've gone to a total immersion clinic, which I can't stress to you enough how terrible I think that they are at teaching. They are absolutely wonderful at teaching you a very pretty stroke. Mm-hmm. They are absolutely terrible at teaching you how to be purposeful, powerful, and efficient in the water. And it bugs me because they give you more drills and they give you more information to swim faster. Anyway, the how to deprogram yourself, and I'll talk about this in saying that if you're listening and you feel like you swim really, really slow, or here's a great example: a person who's been taught that the fewest amount of strokes to get to the other end is the way to go. Very, very common.
Yeah,
it only takes me 8 strokes to get to the end. Well, yeah, it also took you 30 seconds. Congratulations. You just looked pretty for 30 seconds, and I took 14 strokes and looked powerful for about 15. Mm-hmm. For people like that, if you're listening, the best way to do that is a drill, what I call the fist drill, closed fists, and then anything with fast arms. That can be just pull buoy and fast arms. That can be band, and that can also be what I call the Tarzan drill, which is the old. Yeah, it's your favorite, man. Which is the old. It's you either call it the Tarzan drill or the old lady on spring break doesn't want to get her hair wet drill, where you're going out to swim with your kids in the ocean. But no, it's where you swim with your chin out of the water, for the whole 25. And what that does is it forces you to keep your arms wide, which is where you want to swim anyway. We swim within a square, remember? And you have to pull, because that's a great example, Mike, of the body positioning explained.
Yeah.
If you're not reaching and keeping your arms out and pressing down, there's no way you can keep your chin in the water or out of the water. There's no way. Mm-hmm. So if you keep your arms wide and a fast turnover and pull that water, you can keep your chin out and then do a regular 25 after that. But the biggest thing in deprogramming is never having to deprogram somebody to swim faster arms. It's always somebody who has that slower arms. And the best way to do that is just shock your body. Go out and just, literally some people who I get and they're tough to deprogram is the first week. Honestly, some of the sets I give them is just literally give me 25 25s as fast as you can possibly go, as arms as fast as you can possibly go, and I don't want you to think about anything else. Just get your arms moving faster, and then you start to see their stroke rate creep up and creep up and creep up. Now what we can do is if we can increase your stroke rate and we can make it a better stroke, well, now we're in business. Instead of a slower stroke that pulls less, that's a totally other opposite end of the spectrum. You might look pretty, but you can look pretty doing it longer because you'll be out of the water on your bike by mile 10 before you get out of the water. Yeah.
That was one of those deals where we'd be at the lake, and I knew I was in trouble once you said take off your goggles.
That's another thing I did with, we won't go on too long, but that's another thing I really think people should do more of is crisis mode open water stuff. I remember I would have you guys obviously take off your goggles, so you had to keep them out of the water to swim. But then I would also remember, telling you to put your goggles around your neck. And you swimming for 100 and then having to put them back on, or filling your goggles with water and doing a mass start entry. It's like how many bad circumstances can we create, within the scope of that. But that's the Tarzan drill, the spring break, the mom on spring break drill, whatever you want to call it, are definitely some of my favorite drills for deprogramming yourself.
Okay, awesome. And now that we've deprogrammed ourselves and got the right stroke going, how do we structure swim week?
Structuring a swim week is obviously it's going to be somewhat specific to your time, but generally this time of the year, I like to see at least three different sessions. Most people can't get in 4. I would recommend 4 anytime you can swim, anytime you can do a discipline more than less days of the week, so 4 days versus 3, you're always going to be better off. The first day of the week, I always recommend your speed work.
Okay.
Get it out of the way. Get it out of the way when you're fresh. It's also when you're going to be least likely to want to do at the end of the week because everybody's gung ho on Monday. We talked about where if every day of the week was called Monday, we'd be, the world would be perfect. But speed work is your first session, earliest in the week as possible. The second week, I usually prescribe a shorter strength-based session with a lot of band and a lot of buoy work. Your arms are already going to be fatigued, so slowing you down to just work on technique and strength work, you don't get a lot of recovery. But what happens is your arms are so fatigued already from your speed session. By not giving you a super long monotonous session and giving you a shorter one, your attention span is going to be a lot better because you're thinking, all right, I can do this for 45 minutes to an hour, and it might only be 2,000 meter total set, but it's going to be strength and technique work with lots of rest. So it keeps you engaged. You get that technique. You get that strength work in with band and buoy. A lot of times with paddles. And then the last, this time of year, the last, if you're doing 3, will be some kind of just a longer aerobic set. I usually make that my athletes' Friday workout because they really busted their butt Monday through Thursday. And I use Friday as kind of a quote unquote recovery day. And for most of them, if it lines up in their schedules, it could be, have one that's just, aerobic 200s, and you're literally just going to do, 12 to 14, maybe 16 200s, pull buoy and paddles on 20 seconds rest. So you're saving your legs. You're not using your legs. So you can actually get some pretty good recovery from a cycling and running standpoint. So you're not trashing your legs, but you're getting the extra aerobic endurance, which you really, really need the time of the year. If you're capable and able to do any kind of a threshold session, I also recommend that, which is kind of like a race pace type effort. I do also recommend putting that in your fourth, but most people can fit in 2. If you're lucky, you can fit in 3. If you're super dedicated, you can get in 4. But if you're structuring your week, those are the 4 different types of workouts that I recommend building into your plan each week.
Okay. So on that angle, should one of those workouts or more of them be with a master's team, or how do you feel about that whole thing?
Great question.
Thank you.
Great job. I'm glad you got that one. I sent that one. I think one of our listeners actually emailed in and asked us about group training with a group. I am not. I am against poor coaching, and I'm for good coaching.
I got you.
Having said that, many masters coaches only coach swimmers, and the masters group is for only masters type swimmers, that they don't participate in triathlon, they don't understand the sport, they don't even necessarily understand open water swimming. They just know pool. And you can also find triathlete centered kind of masters groups. Those I'm okay with. If you want to, like, once a week, that might be good for your sprint session. But again, you're just, in my opinion, you're just working out with a bunch of other people. You're not getting a lot of one-on-one coaching. If you need that for accountability, I think that's great. But you're not making up the workout. The master's coach is. So where it fits in your training cycle, within your week, within your time of the year, within your abilities, within your strengths and weaknesses, is really anybody's game. I mean, it's just a big crapshoot. I think it's great for accountability if you need it. If getting better doesn't do it for you from an accountability standpoint, you have to have a group. Go with the kind of the with the understanding that you're going to do your own workout. But generally, most I fix more masters coach swimmers than I do tell people to go to master swims.
Yeah, I hear that. I think it is a good idea because obviously you're not opposed to the group thing. I mean, that's a huge part of it. What we did at the lake all the time, we had a nice group of 10 to 20 people out there, and working together with the same type of plan, and being in the water with other people, and being inspired by that, and pushing to get to a certain level underneath the right umbrella, I think is awesome. But where are you going to find that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not many. I don't really know many open water clubs that they might do it once a week, but not in the capacity where we were able to do it 2, 3, 4 times a week.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it till forever, but what you were doing out at the open water training with us 3 times a week usually was just incredible, because it wasn't just going to the lake and swimming 3,000 yards around a big bunch of buoys. It was workouts, and it was specifically tailored to the open water experience, and it was in the guidelines of what you were just talking about, how to schedule your swim week. So I mean, I think that's got to be pretty rare, So
yeah, it's definitely rare. I think there's just a huge difference in swimming in open water and swimming for open water. Even people who say, I'm going to go get some open water swim work in, and they go to the lake and they don't. All they do is swim nonstop. That's not really open water swim training. You're just swimming without doing flip turns. It's like you need to incorporate the same kind of environment and technique and the same. It's really just about demands. Are you training for what the demands are going to be? And People do it for cycling and running. They train for the specific demands of the race.
Yes.
Hillier, flatter, rollers, hot, cold, windy, crowded, not crowded. They literally obsess about every aspect of the race. But when it comes to the open water, they don't. They just want to swim in a pool. They do the total opposite. They totally disregard the physical, mental, and most of the times even emotional demands it is to do a mass start with 3,000 other hysterical people looking out only for themselves on one of the biggest days of their life.
Yeah.
So, swim for open water. Don't just swim in open water, or obviously try to meet those demands as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. And then finally, we'll just touch on this. In Swimcast number 1, it was mentioned in there, but I think all of us at one point or another have jumped into a lake or an open body of water and just took off into the sunset, and then we look back and we realized we were about 30 yards off to the right or something like that, and then we start getting obsessed with this concept of sighting, and then we begin to oversight, and then we are actually swimming less. We're just sighting, and then we forget the stroke and everything like that. But I want you to talk about this concept of swimming square and why people really swim crooked.
Yeah, this is a great one to finish up on, and I kind of touched on it earlier with your hand tree and exit. And when I talk about swimming square, and I guess it's more so swimming within a rectangle, is if you're if you're standing up and you put your arms out to where your forearms are facing the floor. All the way extended is where your arm should enter. And the next thing they should do is pop with your elbows high and your forearms perpendicular, so they're facing backwards. And then literally the next thing they should do is push backwards. So that's the rectangle I'm referring to. Where people get to the reasons people swim crooked, a lot of reasons. Mainly it has to do with your hand entry, because of the old school in like the 80s and 90s, before early vertical form became very popular, was everybody swam with the S. Everybody so bear with me for a minute, but if you enter with your palm facing, instead of facing down, so we'll call that south, facing the water, if your palm instead is facing east or even west, to do the S, or just because that's your hand enters. Once it enters the water, in order to get your palm to where it's facing down to push water, you have to shift it. And there is no way to move. It is not possible for your palm to move left or right, east or west in the water without moving your body the opposite direction.
Got it. Because
that's how it works. And so a lot of people, they'll move their arms left and right, and every time you wave or do this, you're moving your body in the opposite direction. It's super easy to get your body mixed up underwater anyway, because it's such a funny feeling, just having your body, or just floating in water in general. It's hard to kind of wrap your mind around your body in that kind of space. The biggest thing is when people cross their midline. So when you take a stroke and you reach, a lot of people overreach, and they cross their midline. What they mean by cross their midline is they actually will cross like their nose into the other sphere. You have a left and your right sphere. And so what happens is they'll cross all the way over to the left. Well, in order to self-correct to get it back on this side of the body, you have to pull across your body. Well, if you're pulling across your body, now you're pointed the total opposite direction, because you just jerked your body back the other way, and now it's not straight.
Yeah. So you mean like when they cross over, their right arm will cross over and enter the water on the left side of their body.
Exactly. Let me see if I can explain this just a little bit better, so people can. I know it's hard to teach people swimming. I've done PowerPoints, presentations, and stuff, but over a podcast, it's a little more difficult. So if you're taking a stroke with your right arm, and you cross your midline into your left sphere, into the left half of your body, as you pull across with your arm and even your shoulder, doing that, you can do it even just standing there. Your left shoulder now is pointed right across your body to overcompensate.
Yeah.
And if your left shoulder is going right, well, guess what your next stroke's going to be?
Yeah.
That going that direction. And that's one of the biggest reasons why people swim crooked. And the other reason is obviously just a chronic crossing over, and we touched on that with the Tarzan or the mom on spring break drill. Another one is if you're in a pool, look at the bottom and don't let your arms cross over into the black line in the bottom of the pool. I always tell people when they reach for the corners, because if you feel like you're reaching for the corner, and that means like reaching at the very corner of that square, if you feel like you're doing that, then you're probably more likely straight, just because it's hard to gauge. But reaching for those corners of that square to keep it wide, and then keeping your stroke wide are the easiest ways to keep you straight. And a faster turnover also helps you keep yourself to swim straight.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that there's a lot of people talk about. You've talked about it with the legs of triathletes and how tight they are, and how in relation to kicking and everything. But just in general, flexibility is a pretty huge part of swimming, I would imagine. And I think that, at least for me, the reason I tend to sometimes pull underneath my body, is it because I feel like I have more power there, and maybe that's because I'm just not in great swim fitness, or I'm not, flexible enough to keep that wide box all the time, because it feels a little bit harder. So you tend to get lazier and move it in, and at least for me, that's what seems like it could be part of the reason.
Yeah, and it's the easiest way to stay square is to use your 4 points that are the most stable. You got your hips and your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And the more you can keep those square with your arms, the better chance you have, because most triathletes aren't the most efficient, as you touched on, kickers anyway. So you're doing more thrashing with doing no good. And the more you thrash your legs, the more you're going to wiggle. Less wiggle, less wiggle, less wiggle. As another thing I have to work on a lot of triathletes with is they always want to kick and they wiggle so much. Well, if you just lift up your right hip when you're swimming, you're gonna point that the total opposite direction, because if your shoulder goes, your hips goes, and if your hips goes, your leg goes, and all of a sudden, after you know it, you're just heading in the total opposite direction. That's why it's so much easier just to simplify it from the waist up, things you can control, things that are more linear that can go all these different directions, and keep it simple and keep it straight and get faster.
Uh-huh. The one final point on that is because just remembering back to when I was starting, and I think this probably applies to a lot of people, there was a drill where at one point you just to kind of define it in our minds, you would have us lay on a paddleboard, right? And mm-hmm. and then that you had to keep your arms wide because you couldn't cross under the paddleboard and get get that crossing thing, so you had to enter straight out. But that felt, I think for the vision of it, it's the great part, right? Is you get to understanding what the box means, but the reality is your body should be on that rivet you're talking about a little bit. So you're gonna, you're not. In other words, you're not swimming like a flat board on the water all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a great example that I should have used. I'm glad you brought it up. Is that you're pretending like you're swimming with a surfboard underneath you, and you're unable to cross over. That's the kind of square you need to keep, and it's perfect example. Because they don't want to swim crooked, they want to swim straight, and so should you. So that's definitely, if you have to picture something, picture that black line at the bottom of the pool as a surfboard, and keeping you high in the water and swimming square.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, I didn't think it was possible, but there's a lot more there. We could probably talk about swimming for another couple hours, and maybe.
Oh man, I could. Yeah, I could definitely go into a third cast, but it'd probably get a little too technical stuff. Some stuff's just better done in the water, showing people certain things. But yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there. But I think the key that we're putting out a lot of information on swimming, but again, I think the ultimate goal is that we want it to be as simple as possible and not to overthink it. So there's a lot of information here, but in reality, it's all about, like you're saying, fast turnover, swimming with power, breathing every stroke. If you had to sum that up, what we just talked about, to take maybe some confusion out of people and just simplify this whole podcast. Do you got something that you can?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had to mash the two together, as far as things to take away, would be that swimming within your own square almost takes care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot enter the water wide enough, and you cannot exit the water late enough. And if you really take those two, principles to your swimming, that I can't be square enough, I can't enter the water long enough, and I can't exit late enough. Or there's no too late, and there's no too long, and there's no too square. If you can keep those kind of principles in your mind, with that pull buoy still shoved between your legs, then I am 100% confident you're going to get infinitely faster over the next couple weeks.
All right, man. I appreciate it. I hope some people out there, give it a shot and get back to us. Let us know what's happening in your swim life, because we're really interested in hearing feedback, answering more questions. crushingiron@gmail.com. I'd like to send out a special thanks to Josh for being a great, we're building a great friendship and communicating a lot, and he knows why I'm thanking him. But
yeah, I'm gonna thank him too.
Yeah,
I know why you're thanking him. And Josh, thank God there are Joshes in this world, to help out people like you. You definitely need it. And before we go, I got kind of an important question to ask you, Mike.
Oh yeah, the Leadville thing?
Yeah. What are the chances that you're going to pony up and pace me
at Leadville?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm in.
I would say off the top, I would be. You're in?
I'm in.
You got in Leadville. Oh my goodness.
In. Breaking news.
Oh man. The odds are pretty good. Can you define what that means a little bit more? I mean, like what?
I'm going to give you a 10 mile. Yeah, stage. Like, you can't have a pacer till after mile 50.
Oh, okay. Dude.
After mile 50, there are 4 different places to pace. And I got Allie, Blake, I believe, and I was going to go in for you and maybe one more. I've got another commit. I'm not sure she knows what she's getting into, but Ann Malin said she would do whatever she needed to, but I have yet to confirm that with her. But yeah, man, can you sleep on it?
No, well, I'll do that too. But I was also going to ask, can I do the dark and hilly portion?
So the last 50, sure.
When is it again?
August 19th.
Okay, that might work right in there. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to do the Hope Pass section, it's been recommended, but Blake's recommends you do that since you have a very Zen-like mentality and aura, I guess you give off.
Yes, I will be waiting there in meditation, and then you just tap me on the shoulder, and I'll pick it up.
That's what they said. You run the first 50 with your mind, or you run the first 50 with your legs, and the last 50 with your mind.
Okay, I'm in.
All right, done, sold.
Tattooing
it on my left calf.
Okay, anything else? Please.
No, man.
Subscribe.
Have a good week. Give us some. Yeah, subscribe to us. Keep giving us a great feedback. We'll do what we can to answer your questions and hit on the topics you want. Keep up with those awesome iTunes reviews, and we will see you on Thursday.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate your input, man.
Anytime.
I'm going to this pool right now to practice all this stuff.
All right, man. Swim square.
You got it, buddy.
See you, man.